I hate waiting, and I guess some of you do too. I waited for just under 10 seconds then, and some of you were already beginning to feel uncomfortable, weren't you? Come on, be honest. Some of you were thinking, has Matt got a bit crazy? I would love to have waited longer and see how long before somebody else took control. You know, before an elder got up, or before a deacon, or before Josh came back up. Some of you, if you know me well, you're thinking, oh, has Matt forgotten his notes or something like that? Because that's happened before. I was reading, there was actually a new exhibit at London Zoo a few years ago. Genuinely, this happened. It was a new exhibit, a new hippo enclosure. And the staff were really excited about this. New exhibit, new animals, it's going to be great. And they were really confused. And when the feedback forms came in, everyone was really underwhelmed by it all. And they were like, oh. And like the crowd, the visitors were saying it's boring, nothing's happening. And the staff actually had to put a big notice on the fence saying, hippopotamuses surface every 3 minutes. Please be patient and wait. Because people were just walking past, oh, there's nothing there, we'll just keep going. And they just didn't have the patience to wait. When you know something should be happening and it doesn't, it's really frustrating, right? We live in this world that is so fast-paced, and everything seems to be getting faster. And beyond that, that seems to be the priority, seems to be a good thing. In a world of computers and telephones and microwaves and planes that can take us to the other side of the world in a day, to wait just 10 seconds makes us feel uncomfortable. And progress seems to be defined by how quickly something can happen. Faster must be better. And if we can shave a few seconds off that, we think, oh, it must be worth it, right? I guess this will be a bit of a political statement, and lots of you may disagree, but I don't think the fabled 36 minutes shorter time from a train from London to Birmingham with the new HS2 is worth the cost to the countryside. I mean, what are we going to do with the extra 36 minutes that it saves us? Another overpriced Starbucks coffee or something? You know, I mean, what are we actually going to do on that journey we've just saved 36 minutes? And by the way, that paragraph I wrote on ChatGDP, because it's faster that way, right? I genuinely did, you know? And I haven't written the whole sermon on ChatGPT, just so you know. And this passage that we've just had read to us is all about waiting. And it's all about waiting well. And yes, there are some confusing bits in it, which I hope to look at. And yes, some emotions might rise within us that may be fearful, we may be confused, we may be overwhelmed with it all. But just remember, it's about waiting and learning to wait well. And I recognise I haven't, because I started the way I did, I haven't introduced myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Matt Levitt, and I love visiting you here in this church. And some of you I know have been praying for me recently. I won't go into loads of details, particularly following the announcement about Josh. But I went to the doctors a few weeks ago just feeling really rough, expecting some antibiotics because I wasn't prepared to wait it through. And she did some tests and she was like, oh, you're not leaving here. And she sent me to West Suffolk, and it was all a bit confusing, but my heart had gone into a real wonky rhythm. They don't really know why. But I've had a cardiac shock treatment, which sounds a lot worse than it actually is. That's where they stop your heart and start it again. But I'm doing well. I'm doing really fine. My heart's now back into its proper rhythm. So thank you for praying for me. I really appreciate it. But if you haven't been here for the past few weeks, or if you're a visitor here today, and you're really, really welcome, you've come into the middle of this series based around the church strategy, which is to gather, to grow, and to go. And this series is empowered to go. You see, once we've worked out who Jesus is, and then once we've personally accepted the truth of his message, once we've committed our lives to following him, then the natural instinct is to go and live it out and to go and tell others. And actually, it's more than an instinct. It's a command from Jesus. Live it out and tell others. And in many ways, this talk today is really sort of part 2 of the talk that Sam gave 2 weeks ago on the passage just before this one. And Sam's end point was that we are empowered to go because Jesus is our everlasting hope. And that is true. I echo that. But it's not a worldly kind of hope. It's a sure and certain hope. In fact, it's so sure and certain. I must have said this here before. But the way it's expressed in the Greek is in the past tense, the past perfect complete tense. It's such a sure and certain hope that it's expressed as if it's already happened, which is incredible. And it's this everlasting hope we have in Jesus because of his death and his resurrection. Now, the resurrection of Jesus, his coming back to life, is the foundational belief of Christianity. In fact, everything else stands and rests on that. According to Paul later in the New Testament, if that isn't true, our faith is worthless. But, and I'd contend, the next most important theological doctrinal statement for us is that Jesus is coming back. He rose from the dead, but one day he will return. And we're in that period of time in the middle where we have to wait. And it's been 2,000 years, and as we'll discover later, we don't know how much longer it's going to be. But Jesus is returning, and we are empowered because Jesus is coming back. You may have picked up in previous weeks, the guy who's writing this is a guy called Mark, or John Mark, to give him his full name. And he was like the assistant or the attendant or the protege of an apostle, a follower of Jesus called Peter. And Peter passed on the words and deeds that he'd seen Jesus do to Mark, who wrote this gospel. And it was probably written about, 50 years after Jesus, something like that, in the middle of a time where the Emperor Nero was on the throne, in inverted commas. Nero hated Christians. He was persecuting Christians in a horrific way. So they're reading this account that's just been read to us in the middle of intense persecution. Essentially, if you proclaimed you were a Christian, your life was numbered in days. And as soon as they found out about you, they killed you in horrific ways. And so Mark's audience are these Gentile unbelievers who've come to know Jesus. And they're unfamiliar with Jewish customs, at least firsthand they're unfamiliar. And they need to gain a bit of an understanding of this. And Mark explains it to them through his gospel. Essentially, it's a call to discipleship. He said, if you want to follow Jesus, this is what it means to follow him. And Mark explains this to him. He explains that Jesus is the Son of God. He explains that Jesus is actually the Messiah, the ones that the Jews are waiting for. And the wait is over, he says. He says the wait is over, but hold on. Wait a little longer. You see, in Mark's gospel, Jesus is pictured as this guy of action. In other gospels, Jesus is a guy of words, but in Mark's, he's this guy of action. He shows power over demons, power over the world and over the cosmos and over storms on lakes and the power to forgive sins. Mark is less interested in Jesus' words. He's more interested in Jesus' actions. And we come to this passage that has just been read to us, where Jesus is speaking about his return, but we know there's going to be action involved. Remember, Mark is interested in action. And Jesus is responding to a question, well, less of a question, more of a statement, really, by his disciples. His disciples have asked this question about the temple. It's an observation, really. They say, look, Jesus, it's the temple. It's amazing. And it would have been amazing. If you think the cathedral down the road is amazing architecture, it's got nothing on what the temple would have been like. And Jesus took this as a teaching opportunity, and he pushes the temple analogy. You see, they're talking about a physical building, and Jesus sort of merges two discussions. He talks about a physical building, but he also talks about himself as the temple. He's like overlaying two pictures, one on another. He talks about the destruction of the physical temple, but then he also talks about, in the same breath, the destruction of who he is, sort of at the end of time. He's overlaying these pictures one on another. He says that Jerusalem will fall, the temple will fall, and I will fall, but I will come again. And it's not just words, it's actions. And I've got the passage up there again, if you haven't got it. And when we break it up into sections, Mark starts with this title, the Son of Man. And then there's some signs of the end of the age, which we're going to look at in a moment. He says the Son of Man will arrive on clouds and with power and with glory. And Mark always uses the title Son of Man. We think that when the gospel writers talk about Son of God, they're showing you that Jesus was God. And when they talk about Son of Man, they're showing you he was man, he was human. And that's true, but that's not all they were saying. Son of Man is actually much more of a title taken from way back in history, from Daniel chapter 7. And when you read that, you see that the coming Son of Man is a highly exalted figure, a figure with authority, a figure with majesty, a figure with power, a figure worthy of awe, which kind of doesn't sound like Jesus walking on the planet, but he's claiming this title for himself. He's claiming sort of a well-known, exalted role in history and in future. He's claiming it upon himself. And Jesus kind of does it quite subtly in some ways. He doesn't walk around going, I'm the Son of Man, I'm the Messiah, worship me. That's not Jesus' style. But at times, at important moments, he claims titles for himself. And he says, I am the Son of Man. When Jesus returns, he is not coming as a helpless baby in a manger at Bethlehem. He is coming as the Son of Man in his divine role. At the moment, he's seated at the right hand of the Father God. And when you sit at the right hand of someone, you have their power and their authority. He's coming as sustainer of creation. Revelation describes him as having hair white like wool and white as snow, and eyes like blazing fire, and feet like bronze glowing in a furnace. His voice will be like the sound of rushing water. In his right hand he will hold 7 stars. And coming out of his mouth will be a sharp, double-edged sword. His face will shine like the sun in all its brilliance. He will be holy. He will be sinless. He is the first. He is the last. He is the living one. The one who was once dead, but now I am alive. Look, forever. I hold the keys of Hades and death. I am the Lord of time. One title that's given to him, we don't really read it because how it's translated in our Bibles, but sometimes when you read in your Bibles the word Lord, but with a small capital L, that comes way back. It's a title, the Lord Sabaoth, which means the Lord host, sword-wielding commander of the angelic armies. Jesus is going to be coming back in that role, okay, as the commander of the angelic armies. One day he will return, as I said, not as a baby in a manger, but in glory as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he will come to wrap history up. He is not going to be wearing a crown of thorns on his head, but he is going to be wearing a crown of many crowns on his head. And by the way, in the book of Revelation, a crown is always a picture of authority. And Jesus is wearing a crown of many crowns. The ultimate authority. Not just as a sacrificial lamb, but as a lion, king of his pride. He's going to come roaring out of heaven. Now, I say all of that. There's no cause for fear, but there might be one for holy reverence. There might be cause with that description to push us to our knees. Because at that moment, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is Lord. And he will gather the elect, those that know him and love him. He will gather them together from the ends of the earth. And of course, that is a moment worthy of silence, of quiet, of awe. There's a picture later in Revelation where Jesus is exercising his power and he's opening the seals of judgment. And when he gets to the last one, it says there was quiet in all of heaven for half an hour. There are moments where we praise with noise and with joy and with laughter. And there are moments where we kneel in a silent awe. You see, our world presents Jesus as a good, honest teacher, a humble Jew, kindly old man. But one day he will step out of heaven with fire in his eyes, and he'll step off his throne and come back to earth. He will return as exalted king. And it's a promise that brings hope and reassurance to believers. It's the promise that bookends God's involvement with his world. The resurrection is so important. It's the foundation of our faith. But coupled with it is the knowledge that Jesus will return. It's a promise from God. And I don't know what your life has been like up until this point. My guess is some of you will have had it easier than others. Some of you will have experienced things that nobody else would want to experience. But inside all of us is the ache for it to be made right. Where we feel like injustice has happened to us, where we didn't deserve it, there is an ache in all of us for it to be made right, for unfairness to be made fair, for evil to be punished, for lies to be made known, and for us to be vindicated, for hard work to be acknowledged and praised. We want things to be made right. And that is what will happen when Jesus returns. There's a word we all know, and it's the word justice. Justice will be made when Jesus returns. You see, justice is about harmony. Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about harmony. Revenge is about making yourself feel better. And that is a quote from the great philosopher Batman. Just so you know. But it's true. We want justice, which brings about a harmony. And justice is a really important concept to Christians. The Bible describes God as a just ruler, one who acts to ensure that wrongs are righted. You know, as a Western church, I think we're obsessed with God being loving. And of course he is. You'll all quote to me the passage from 1 John, God is love. But he's also just. In fact, I don't think you can have true and complete love without justice. Because you want things to be right. And as a society, I think we've subtly twisted what we mean by love, and we've overlaid love to be what I want and what's best for me, and then we overlay that definition onto God. So when we say God is love, we tend to think how we perceive love, not how he perceives love. God is not just loving, full stop. His love is made complete in complete justice. The two concepts intermingle, as does all theology, actually. And God's loving nature actually means nothing without justice. His forgiveness means very little without justice. As parents, you know that, right? You try raising a child just by being loving and forgiving. When they do something wrong, you go, oh, it doesn't matter. I love you. You try raising a child like that, what would you create? Self-entitled, selfish monsters. That's what you'd create. Because you know that even though you love them, there has to be a sense of justice in your dealing with them and with their siblings. You know, as hard as it might be, the idea of punishment and the idea of consequence and the idea of justice and the idea of saying sorry but meaning it is a part of your love as a parent. God's love was so perfect, it meant Jesus had to go to the cross, which we'll celebrate later. You see, I think we can get fearful and worried about, and tied up even, about times and dates and signs and looking in the sky and portents. But this passage is actually about a God who is in control and in charge and who one day will make all things right. A God who has ultimate power and ultimate authority, and where evil will be met face to face and dealt with. And then eternity will be opened up, and the new heavens and the new earth will be glorious and majestic, in part because evil has been dealt with. And Jesus wants his disciples to learn from it. That's why he goes on to talk about, the fig tree. He's saying, look, disciples, listen, be ready for this moment. And he gives this picture about a fig tree. He's using this picture to teach them about discerning what is happening. And we get this, right? We recognize changing seasons. We all almost instinctively know the change of seasons. We notice when spring is moving into summer, when the buds on the trees take full sort of leaf. And we notice when summer moves into autumn, where the colours begin to change and where the leaves begin to fall. And we notice then when autumn moves to winter, where the leaves have dropped off the tree and everything looks dead. And then we know the signs of spring beginning once again. But if I asked you when those things were going to happen, you'd go, I don't know. I mean, we know roughly, we could bracket it within a few months, and we know the signs to look out for, but we don't actually know the specific when. And that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, watch out for the general signs that I'm returning. Be vigilant, be discerning, understand the times we're living in, try and see what God is doing. But I'm not telling you a specific date or month. Jesus doesn't do that. The application for us today in some ways is really simple. Are you ready? Whilst you wait, are you ready for Jesus' return? Some people are always late, aren't they? And I'm looking at myself in a mirror sometimes. Certainly when I was growing up, my mum was always late. She was the mum who was always last picking her kids up. There's always one, isn't there, right? That was my mum. Like, everyone else has gone home. All the doors are locked. There's one teacher having to wait with us who's being really polite, but is really off with us because she wants to go home. And she's like, have you told your mum? Yes. Is your mum coming? Yes. It was more than 10 minutes late. My mum was like, she'd already be 20 minutes late and decide now was the time to paint the lounge or something. This was what my mum was like. All of us kids, there were 4 of us all waiting. Some people are always late. Some people are always early. They're starting, they know the time. Very few people are exactly right every time. And Jesus is saying, watch, because I'm coming soon, but I'm going to be smack on time. Exactly the right time. And I think because of his love, he's delaying it. The Bible says that, but he's smack on time. Jesus is saying, watch, be ready, I'm coming soon. Now, of course, the million-dollar question everyone asks is, well, what is soon, right? What scale are we on? Have we got, metaphorically, half an hour to go? Or have we got 15 minutes? Have I got time to paint the lounge before you come again, Jesus? And, of course, we all think, I want to avoid being on the toilet when Jesus comes back, right? So what sort of time scale are we on? Are we in the end times? Have these things already taken place? Has the branch of the fig tree already become tender? Has it begun to burst forth its leaves? Is summer near? Frustratingly, I don't know. And that's deliberate. You know the passage about the day or hour. Nobody knows, not even the angels in heaven, not even the Son. And there are very, very few things in the Bible which sort of distinguish God the Father and God the Son. And here is one moment where this seems to be kept just for God the Father. God has got this in hand. He is waiting. He is waiting as long as he can for as many people to come to know him as possible. But one day he will turn and instruct his Son to rise from the throne and step down onto earth with angels and trumpets at his side. Note, he says, not even the day or hour. His coming is that specific. That there is a day and there is an hour when he will come again. I don't know why he's not specific with us, but I can guess. From looking around at my mum and others, we'd push the boundaries, wouldn't we? Oh, he's not coming till tomorrow. I can do what I like today. He's not coming till next week, so I can have some sinful fun now and just say sorry in a week's time. That's the human condition. So he doesn't tell us why. And some of us are the opposite. Some of us sort of are watching the sky, waiting for every sign, reading it. And by the way, if anyone tells you they've worked out the Bible code of when Jesus is coming back, they're talking rubbish. They haven't. And of course, some people will think we've been waiting thousands of years. We'll keep on waiting. And they sort of get a bit lazy and a bit mediocre. And they put it off till tomorrow. Maybe that's where you sit in your Christian life. Have you just got a bit lazy and a bit mediocre in it? And, well, it doesn't matter. Well, of course it does. Because the truth is, if we did know Jesus was coming tomorrow, we'd probably act very differently today. Even though Sam sort of did joke about it last week. What would we do today? If we knew Jesus was coming back tomorrow, we'd look busy. That's actually a quote from the Pope. Did you know that, Sam? Yeah. You quoted the Pope without even knowing it. It was the Pope, and he said it tongue-in-cheek. I'd look busy. But of course, that's how some of us actually would act. And Jesus is really quite vague. Now, he does give us some signs. Of course he does. It's in the passage we read. He said there are going to be famines and earthquakes, and nations will rise against nation, and kingdom will fight against kingdoms. They're just birth pains, he says. False prophets will appear. The sun will darken. The moon won't give its light. Stars will fall from heaven. Now, of course, Jesus is still teaching in two frames of reference. He is talking about in an earthly sense. There will be famines. There will be earthquakes. There will be persecutions. And he's also talking in a cosmic sense. I think when Jesus returns, the sun and moon and stars will shake. I can't work out what that looks like in a physics sense, because I know if stars fall, we're in problem, right? I can't work out what that looks like in a scientific physics sense, but I know creation itself will tremble when Jesus gets off his throne. The sun will darken in a way I can't quite understand, but probably isn't just an eclipse. I don't know what stars will fall looks like. Yes, stars can mean sort of authority figures and people. And authority figures and people will fall. But so will the stars of the heavens. Powers will be broken, both earthly and spiritually. And then he follows it up, doesn't he, with another illustration, one which is a bit easier to us to understand. I love it when Jesus does that, because it's like he's looking in the faces of his disciples and they're blank, right? He can tell they haven't got it. He's talking about temples falling and stars, and he looks in their eyes and they haven't got it. So he goes, right, I'll dumb it down for you. I'm dumbing it down for Jack and me, right? This is Jesus dumbing it down for you and me. He says, right, it's like, I think I've got this on here. It's like a man going away. And you can see the relief on the disciples' face because they're like, oh, we understand this, right? It's like a man going away. And this is easier for us to understand. I mean, we don't have gatekeepers or guards on our houses. We have locks and alarms instead. But we've stayed in hotels. We know what gated communities are like. We know what it's like to have security or to have a doorman whose sole job it is to stay awake and to watch. And Jesus says, I want you guys to be the security, to be the doorman, to stay awake and watch. He says, don't get complacent. Don't think it's somebody else's problem. Part of our job as Christians is to stay awake and watch and to tell a waiting world. When he says his coming is imminent, we tend to think speed. But actually, it's better to think imminent as unexpected. It's coming, but we don't know exactly when. In fact, some of the New Testament believers thought that Jesus was coming really soon. But not all of them did. And in fact, the Thessalonians, when you read the letter to the Thessalonians, their lifestyle was one of, oh, Jesus is coming back soon, so it doesn't matter what we do. We can do anything we like. And Paul writes to them saying, no, you can't think like that. He says, persevere. Stay on the course. He's saying it's not that imminent. All of the teaching of Jesus and all of the teaching of Paul, and by this I'm sort of coming into land a bit, all of their teaching about the Christian faith is one of longevity, of perseverance, of staying the course, of running the race. We don't know how long it's going to be, tomorrow, next year, 10 years, 20 years. We don't know how long our lives are. But however long it is, stay the course. Run the race set before you. The mark of discipleship, that means as a follower of Jesus, the mark of discipleship is faithfulness to the end. That's the mark of being a Christian. The one marker of being a Christian is faithfulness to Jesus until the end. To run the race set before you, to stay faithful. I don't know whether it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I know this, I can stay faithful to the end. It's never enough to just be faithful the night before Jesus comes. The real test of faithfulness is not how we behave if his coming is imminent, but how we behave if it's a long time coming. I mean, it's obvious, as Jesus says. If we knew the thief was coming tomorrow, we'd stay awake, right? But will we stay awake and be ready if we don't know if he's coming tomorrow? Just as I begin to end and sort of give a nod to the title that I was given, which was Empowered to Go, there are some 3 easy to understand truths from this passage for us to focus on. And the first is, are you ready? There will be, as I've said, a day in history where Jesus will return. It will happen. This world does not endure forever. Sin, injustice, tyranny, evil, oppression, and death will not continue forever. Jesus will return and bring history to an end. Are you ready? The second truth is, he is coming back. He is coming back. Some of you, particularly the older ones maybe, will know this stories like this from World War II, when maybe your parents or grandparents experienced it. And, you know, husbands are away fighting and wife is away at home. And wife is waiting, waiting for husband to return. They don't know exactly when, but they're waiting, hoping that he will return. And acting each day as if it will happen. But he is coming back. There's no doubt about it. Do you, sitting here today, you don't have to answer this out loud, but do you believe that he's coming back? And whilst we are waiting, whilst we're getting ready, know this, that we have jobs to do. We have tasks to achieve. We're not trying to earn our salvation. We're not trying to earn our love. That's impossible. But we have got jobs to do. The last thing that Jesus told his disciples, in the book of Matthew at least, is this. Look, until I return, I want you to go out. Teach people to obey everything I've commanded you to do. Baptize them in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit. Go and make disciples of all nations, he says. We've got a task to do. And I pray that if Jesus comes back today, I won't be ashamed or embarrassed or negligent because I haven't tried to do the things he's asked me to do. And of course, the third command is keep watch. He's saying keep watch, be on your guard. Whilst we're doing the jobs we've got to do, when we get up and go to work tomorrow morning, are we keeping watch? It's quite poignant, isn't it? That probably a few weeks later, Jesus has eaten with his disciples and they've got up to the garden to pray. And he says, could you not even keep watch for 1 hour? You fell asleep. And Jesus in this, he's saying, don't put your trust in people, don't put your trust in buildings, don't put your trust in the temple, put your trust in me. And if Jesus returned today, are there things that you might have regret that you haven't done for him? Are there things that maybe you need to be obedient to? Are there issues in your life that you need to deal with that you've been putting off? Are there sins that you need to confess? Are there charities that you're called to support? Are there mission agencies that you need to get involved with? Are there volunteer hours that you need to make available? Are you called to be generous and generous in the extreme? Whatever it is, are you ready? I'm going to ask the band to come up now, just as we begin to move this to an end before we move into a time of communion. But we wait. And God delays as long as possible because God is a God of love and grace and mercy. He waits as we wait. But know this as I close, the wrath of God appears more frequently than the love of God in the Bible. God is a God of love, but he's also a holy God, a judging God, and a wrathful God. He is slow to anger, he is rich in love, but at one point he will return, and every knee will bow and call him Lord. Are you ready? We're going to have a time of worship, a song that we're going to sing. You may choose to stand and sing that, brilliant. You may actually choose to sit and contemplate what God has said to you this morning. We're going to have a worship song. And please use this as an opportunity. If you haven't collected the elements for communion, the bread and the wine, either get up and collect them or leaders in the church will bring those to you. And then we'll move into a time of communion together.